Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Founders Code. My guest today is a co-founder of an engineering effectiveness platform, Uplevel, and a managing director of Homa Advisory, helping startups make better people decisions. He sat on startup advisory boards and even was an entrepreneur in residence for Madrona Venture Labs. And I'm certain there is a lot that we can learn from him today. Please welcome David Youssefnia. Hi, David.
Hi, Shamil. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good. Thanks for having me.
Let's dive right in. And starting with the big one. What do you think, in your experience, in practical experience, are the biggest issues that founders are running into? What are the biggest mistakes they're making at the start of working on their venture that are not that obvious at the
That's a
start?
great that's a great question. I think when you're starting from zero, there's a lot of emphasis on um, do we believe in what we're building? What kind of company are we going to build? Are we going to bootstrap? Are we going to go for funding? What kind of culture do we want to build? And then, there's the elusive goal of, okay, how do we get from 0 to 1 and 1 to 10 and 10 to 100? That product market fit. And then, there's all the due diligence that we go through when raising money, as investors, go through and take a look under the hood. Okay, what do you have from a product standpoint? How is a company formed? And I think that there's a lot of information out there on all those things. There's a lot of great books. There's a lot of great advisors. And there's a lot of standard things that you would do. There's like the SAFE agreements, and there's all the different founder and advisory agreements that just accelerate that process to make it easy. Where I think, and I don't know if it's a mistake or just a lack of awareness, that there's not a lot of work done between founders to better understand who each of those founders are. There
Can you
is
dive a bit deeper on that?
yeah, for sure. So there's okay, what did you do the things that I need? So if I'm like a sales and marketing, co-founder, and you're a technical co-founder, do you have the technical skills to get your hands into the code in the beginning and then quickly manage, the first set of hires as builders to do that? Do you have the domain expertise in the tech stack, or like the learning agility to learn the new things? And things are changing very, very quickly right now. But then there's like a deeper understanding of who each person is and how are they wired to work generally. And this is going beyond just like, okay, you like pickleball, I like pickleball, so then we have something in common. You went to the same school as me, or live in the same community as me, and so we kind of can vet each other. But startups are hard, right? And startups are full of ambiguity. And if you're raising money, then there's all the other things that come with that in terms of moving fast and trying to hit your milestones. And so, how is each person wired to work under that pressure of uncertainty, right? As well as this high stakes pressure. And are you going to keep going, or are you going to start to crack? And it's okay to crack, right? But it's having an understanding of what's more likely to happen when someone cracks, and how can you both anticipate and work with each other. And so I think there's less of that happening with founding teams. And I think some teams go through it. And unfortunately, sometimes they go through it when it's too late, right? When the wheels are starting to come off, and then there's kind of hard conversations to have, or things start to go in kind of separate ways. And founders leave, companies all the time. There's the guy who, as he sold his share of Apple to Jobs for like $800 or something like that, which would have been worth billions. But if people are coming together because they have passion around the idea, there's also, I think a good justification for investing in, that better understanding. And we're not talking about spending months and months and tens of thousands of dollars. There are a lot of lightweight things that can be done. There are coaches, there are people out there that can help with that as well.
Oh, and for people, usually you cannot know what you don't know. And
Right.
having had all that experience and kind of knowledge. As somebody, because I speak to a lot of like early stage founders as well,
Mhm.
and I can see that they haven't even started thinking about their confounding fit
Right.
for each other for a certain industry. What are the kind of like small tricks or small things that people can do in order to kind of understand that fit and maybe, well, to
Mhm.
be able to then work on it and see what's missing, how can we improve?
Yeah, I mean, I think at a a really basic kind of low hanging fruit is to just kind of scenario plan, right? Say, okay, what would happen, or how would you feel if this happened versus that? Like these
Mhm.
are different, situations, and seeing how people might react to that, or having conversations about that. Having a pretty open conversation about, okay, if we go down this path, these are all the different things that we might expect. It's kind of like a realistic job preview, right? When you give someone a realistic job preview, okay, here you're going to come in and this is your role as a product manager, let's say, and these are all the good things, and here are some of the things that might be a little hard to do. Like having conversations about the hard part, because some people glorify kind of the startup world, right? Like they were working for a big company, have a great, nice cushy paycheck, but they're kind of doing they have the skills to do all of these different things, but you're kind of really narrowly focused in a larger company. So what's appealing is like, oh, I get to work on all these different problems, right? But then there are problems. There are other problems that you may not be aware of, right? Like we might run out of money for 6 months, or your goals that you set from a revenue standpoint, like those are great, but what if you don't hit them, right? And what are you willing to do? And what do we do when we get to that point, right? And so those are some of the things that I think founders can do at a kind of low hanging fruit level. But then you can start to look at some different assessments depending on what you're trying to do and what the team is. There are a few different personality assessments out there that have some science behind them and give a sense of, and are purpose designed. They're designed not from a clinical standpoint, but designed from like a workplace standpoint to get a
Yeah.
sense of, okay, how are you wired to work, and then you layer on top of that the context of where you're working, and seeing where there's a fit, and where there's not a fit. It's not a question of, okay, I'm going to go with a different founder. It's just like knowing what your blind spots are can be really valuable for the individual founder, but as well the founding team. And as a result, if the founding team is working well together, then the next set of hires see that, right? And then it goes on from there. But if the founding team is, uh, it's not just about disagreements. If they're having like dysfunctional disagreements, and that permeates through the culture, and then you have like us versus them mentality, which can be really destructive at an early stage of a company. You can make a decision because of like which camp you're in versus what's the right decision to make for the company, and that could be a huge missed opportunity.
And it's something that probably constantly distracting. I can imagine having those, meetings with all team, and you can just feel the tension in between,
Right.
which kind of doesn't allow you to just focus on building the business instead
Building.
of
Right.
you're just like in an emotional kind of state.
Yeah, exactly.
And I noticed that, being a founder, it takes a certain type of a person to be a good founder, because right now everybody's trying to achieve this financial freedom. The only way is start a business, become a founder,
Right.
start a startup, get venture money. And it seems like everybody's trying to make a run for it. But uh, in order to help people understand the intricate details of like what does the life have to be like to lead to a point where you're ready to become a founder, can you talk to us a bit about your earlier days? Like, what were you like back when you were a kid, when you were a teen in school?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I always had an entrepreneurial, bent, with mixed amount of success. Like, was a guy selling candy to my friends in middle school, and then started a pool cleaning business, and then always had jobs throughout high school, but always knew that like I wanted to. Um, Wake up and enjoy what I was doing. And, when you get to work and you kind of have that realization that work plays you spend most of your time working, right? And you don't want to be around, you don't want to have that part be the thing that you regret the most. So, spent time in college as a psychology major, and with that framework, I tried or sampled the clinical side of things. Was a peer counselor, worked in a research a clinic, and had firsthand experience and exposure to what it was like to work in a clinical setting. And there's nothing wrong with clinical work. I think it's super valuable and people need that, and especially these days. I just knew it wasn't for me. I just knew that like the amount of the heaviness of kind of carrying people's problems wasn't something I wanted to do for 40, 50 plus hours a week. And so I was still drawn to human behavior, right, and understanding how people work just in kind of say less clinical settings and more kind of day-to-day settings. So that led me to social psychology, and then I took a class in industrial organizational psychology, and I just like, wow, this is interesting. It kind of combines kind of the interest in business as well as the interest in human behavior. There was a lot of data behind it, and then worked for a graduate student on his PhD lab. Helped him, kind of analyze and collect data for his dissertation. He finished, and then he passed me along to his advisor, who happened to be the head of the program, and that was kind of a talk about like being in the right place at the right time. I didn't know how well regarded he was until like after the fact when I went to apply to graduate school, and it was kind of an instrumental part to helping with a letter of recommendation and all of that. And so there's always this like enjoy what you do, have some passion around it, and try to make those choices. And I always knew I wanted to go out and start a consulting business. I thought I would do it like later in life, and then I started my career in consulting, and within 7 or 8 years, I left and started my consulting business, which I ran for about 14 and a half years. Yeah.
And that got me to thinking. I remember that TV show Billions
Yeah.
with Axel Rod, and they had a corporate psychologist whose
Yeah.
goal was to go there and make sure that people are fired up. They're not like
Yeah.
drawn. They're not blocking their own success. And what I noticed, like in myself, my role as a founder was always to be like the kind of mentor and trainer for people. And it would be a lot because my wife is a psychoanalyst with like 10
Mhm.
years of like practical experience. And she teaches me a lot with this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it really helps to be able to talk to the people in the company to really understand how they're feeling and knowing how to help them get to the
Yeah.
better side of them, which I think a lot of people lack when trying to grow a healthy team.
Yeah. I think that there's a realization that that's important now too. So like the role of the manager now isn't just to direct work, but is also to help their employees to grow their careers and see what the path is, right? And the work that I was doing at Mercer, as well as when I was running critical metrics, was around this category that's now kind of called employee listening. We did a lot of employee survey work. And, typically you're asking employees, do you understand where the company's headed? Do you believe in the leadership? Do you enjoy what you're doing? Do you understand what your benefits are? Like, how focused are you on the customer? Things that are all important levers, right? Like if you're running a large enterprise, to know that your people understand it. And if there's a part of the organization that doesn't, then you can kind of guide some interventions around that. We also ask questions around your likelihood of staying with the company, right? That's one of the biggest predictors of turnover. And generally speaking, over my career, that's always been kind of an important piece of it, right? Because regardless of, there's small pockets of time where unemployment rates are, double digits, and that's, everyone typically stays in their jobs during those times because they have fewer
Yeah,
options. But
scared.
you don't want to treat them, poorly, so that when the market changes, they're like, they're bailing and they're getting out of here, right? Um, and so one of the things that's commonly done in the field is to see, okay, how can we predict that intention to stay
Hmm.
based on how people respond to other parts of the question, right? and other parts of the survey. And
What are the important questions that you ask there that can kind of give you the hints?
oh well, so what we well I'll get to that in a second. So
Yeah.
what we
Okay.
do is we just it's like a regression model. Sometimes you get a little more advanced by getting too technical. Is run a model. Say okay, for the overall employee population, what are the top drivers of employee retention and employee engagement? And across probably, I don't know, hundreds of times we've done this, if not more, having a sense of career opportunities, right, is one of the key pieces, right? So if an employee feels that the organization is investing in them so they can grow, right, and it's not just based on promotions, it's based on learning, it's based on opportunities, it's based on exposure, right?
Yeah.
They feel right that the employer is investing in them, and in return, I'm going to invest back into this organization by staying longer, showing up, putting in that extra discretionary effort, and that is what the kind of the gold around this, right? If people
Mhm.
can, if organizations can say, okay, let's create a work environment where people are motivated and see a future, they're going to want to be there. And oftentimes there's it's not as clear for everyone, right?
Mhm.
Um, and some roles in organizations have a higher market value, so an organization might prioritize investing in those versus others. But then you end up having problems in some other parts of the organization, so then it becomes a challenge there too.
Hmm. Another big thing that I notice, if we go back to the question of, what changes within founders throughout the years. And I noticed, like, even on the last podcast that's going to come out this week that I've recorded, we've talked about these things where every 6 or 7 years, there are these big shifts in
Mm-hmm.
your way of thinking, in your prioritization about things. And we were debating whether it is worth kind of trying to induce the way of thinking at like when you're 45 compared to
Mm-hmm.
when you're 30 compared to when
Mm-hmm.
you're 20, because at each of these stages there is like a different motivation, but at the same time you approach things differently, you think in different scales. Have you noticed any of like major changes happening to you throughout your life, maybe before starting up level?
Yeah, I think that what the aha moment for me was after, like, I don't know, a couple years of doing that kind of key driver analysis for our clients when I was running my consulting business. And I also had this as an employee, right? Like is that notion of, um, as an employee, is the employer investing in me? And firsthand, like my first week as started as an intern at Mercer. And I remember one of my bosses, Joe Parenti, he um, called me into his office. He's like, David. He's like, yeah. I'm like, we're going on a sales call, like a phone call, right? And they had like a script, like a kind of, they were using some sort of sales script to help qualify and get the client closer to seeing the value. It's like, when we get to question 6, you're gonna ask it. I was like, really? And I was like, wow, okay, great. And like I don't even remember the question. All I remember, I came home, I was like, this place is awesome, right? And the same kind of approach, right, is what I took with my consulting business and the people that work for me. Was I didn't just throw them in the deep end of the water, right? But I kind of slowly, like, would expose them to more and more responsibilities, to the point where, like, some of the projects, like, we just had the client run, right? I mean, we just had the my team run it almost without me, and they were totally like jazzed about it because they could have gotten a job at a bigger firm and they wouldn't have had as much client management responsibilities. And you also have to understand your team, right? And not everyone is like wired to do business development, but you understand their strengths. But some are really wired to be great project managers and have that attention to detail and move things along. So it's kind of, I think the shift for me happened early on to say, okay, well, we don't need to do, we had a small team, but we don't need to do an employee survey to know how people were feeling. We'd have one-on-ones and kind of check-ins, but we know across the board that if people feel like they're growing in their career, they're going to stay with us. And so that's kind of the shift that happened. And then we carried that on, when we co-founded Uplevel, it kind of give every employee had like and we had funding, but it wasn't a massive amount of funding. They had like a discretionary budget to go to any conference that they wanted to go to, right? As long as relative to what they're understanding. And they would, some would go and say, hey, can I go to this? Like kind of sheepishly, but like you say, they weren't sure. I'm like, does it connect with what you're trying to build for the company? They're like, yeah. I'm like, then go. And they'd come back and they'd share, they'd share their notes and it was a great opportunity for them.
And what has been driving you to build companies? Because it feels like it's a lot more stable and safe, trying to, like, if you have that entrepreneurial fire, you basically know how to get shit done. And if you use that within a large organization to actually drive results for them, I feel like you're almost guaranteed to be like a star employee that everyone's gonna be like, dude, just chill and try to do less. What has driven you to abandon, the safe and stable kind of life towards like, I'm just gonna go and, I don't know, bungee jump and see where this leads me to?
Well, there's the zero for me. It's like the 0 to 1. Trying to get from like an idea and then putting it into people's hands is like super intriguing and appealing. But it's also hard because like at that stage, does it close? It's probably like there's a 90% failure rate, right? And 95% of founders think they're in that top 10%, right? So. But like, I think, to answer your question, I think there's like the seeing what's around the corner has always been a driver for me. And so there are kind of these punctuated points throughout my career where it led me to do the next thing, right? And so when I'm kind of dating myself a little bit, when I was at Mercer, like the first rounds of surveys that we did were all paper. Then we went to web. Then we got it was web surveys with paper reports, and then we got PDF reports, and then the whole thing was a platform. And then we went from hosting your own surveys technology to the cloud. And I saw that as an opportunity because I'm like, I don't need a whole big IT team to code up a survey every time we're doing it with all the wonkiness that was happening back then. We can, date different technology providers, and they're all that was their model. So we were able to do that and did that successfully with a few partners for about 14 plus years. Probably 10 years into it, we were working with a large hospitality brand, the Hampton Inn, and we had multiple projects with them over 4 or 5 years. The first round of work was like to evaluate the training that they had invested in. But because of their lack of access to data, we had to go out and collect that data firsthand. So I had a team of researchers. In 5 weeks, we visited 100 locations, collecting data from managers and teams and observing their interactions around training. And we were able to show them the path to training success. So when the manager believed in the training, they encouraged their team to use it. When the team used it, they saw results. And the training was mainly focused around, guest interaction and customer service type behaviors. We then said, hey, let's see what else managers can do, because like training is making an impact on property performance. So what else is there that managers can do? So we did a day in the life study that helped us understand what does a day in the life of a manager look like? What are the key behaviors of managers that drive property performance? Very similar to Google's Project Oxygen, which has been around for almost 20 years now. Mm-hmm. And then a couple years later, they asked us to revisit the training evaluation project because they had launched a bunch of new training. And so sure. And they said, well, listen, this time you don't need to go visit 100 locations. We have a learning management system. We're going to give you a pipeline to that data to answer the questions that you were collecting data for manually or in person. I was like, okay, great. Happy to do that. I still go to a few of the properties because it's nice to have someone there that's not like evaluating them from a QA, quality inspection perspective. So
Was that
sure.
kind of like of an AI moment for you? Like, but back then it's like, oh, these things
Yeah.
can take our job. Like,
Well, no, not to take our job, but that companies are beginning. This was the pivot. Like companies are beginning to
take it seriously.
recognize the value of the digital footprint that employees were leaving in work, right? This was pre-COVID. Work was more digitized. There was this kind of record of how people were interacting with customers, how people were interacting with the training, and we were able to kind of use that to answer, big questions for a client. I was like, well, what else can be done with that data? And that thought kind of was like stuck in my head for a while. And we had done it before in kind of a limited sense for some of our other clients. And then fast forward to 2017, I met with the folks at Madrona Venture Labs, and they were like, hey, what do you think of this space? I'm like, well, I've been thinking about it this way. And they're like, well, we've been thinking about it too. Fast forward, we joined them as an EIR, and we incubated Uplevel out of there
Hmm.
to focus on the software development team productivity question by applying machine learning and organizational science to the footprint data that was left in Slack and Teams and Calendar and Jira and the code repos. It's a big problem to solve.
Yeah.
If you can solve it, yeah. So that was an exciting kind of next kind of transition. And then I don't know the next thing is like I think there's low hanging fruit with AI for people to just make their jobs more efficient. Something that would have taken you weeks or months, you can spin up in a couple of days. But it's an ongoing process, right? And we're moving. Everyone's moving fast, and some people moving faster. I think what's the saying? Like
Hmm.
AI won't replace your job, but you'll be replaced by someone that does use AI for their job, right?
That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
And with this approach, it's actually something that I advise to a lot of people too before jumping into the founder's chair to try and do some work as a consultancy to kind of
yeah.
talk to those people, try to solve their problems, see if those problems repeat in between different like industries and companies. And if they do, then you have a solution that you can direct to those customers as well. Uh, what is your take? Do you think that's a viable approach to take nowadays when things are going so fast?
To be like an AI advisor.
Yeah, first, before getting AI first startup.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like maybe, but I don't know how. This stuff's moving so fast, right? There are definitely companies that have that need right now, but I feel like it's within a shorter period of time, whatever time period I put out there, it's probably shorter than that, but I may call it 6 to 18 months. Like it's just going to be baked into almost everything. So there's no company that doesn't use technology. I mean, there might be like even a landscaper, right? Like they still can use technology to schedule things and billing, right? But it's going to be baked into it becomes more of a utility, right? Like there's no company that doesn't use the internet right now,
Yeah.
right? But like when the internet first came out, that was a whole big thing, right? And prior to that, like remember when I mean, you could look up old ads for like electricity and all. Like they're trying to convince people to use electricity,
Yeah.
right? Now, so I don't think that it's not a space that I would get into. I'm sure that people will be able to make some money and then they'll evolve into something else. But like you can, if you go to like a talk by one of these firms and they share what they're doing, like if you're savvy enough and have enough kind of prompt engineering skills, right? Or hire someone that does, you can pretty quickly replicate a lot of their offering, right? But it's just could also be just a matter of bandwidth. So like it could be like a resource augmentation thing. Say our team's heavily focused on working with our customers, delivering work right now, but so we don't have the bandwidth, so we bring someone on to help us do that.
Yeah.
So I could see some people doing kind of being like a AI champion, fractional AI champion or implementer of some sort.
And what do you notice as to like the realistic adoption rates? Because I look at a lot of like large companies, like,
Mhm.
and we talk about AI being all over the place now, but if you look at large companies, like the biggest, okay, if we don't talk about like customer support function, development function, like all other functions, they kind of use workflows, which are not
Right.
necessarily AI
Yeah.
integrated. And there is a lot of emphasis on pushing them towards like
Yeah.
you guys have to research and make use of every single AI tool, like what's out there.
Right.
What are you seeing?
Like it's a change management question. The technology is ready, but the reason why it's not being adopted is because the people aren't ready. And that could mean I can use something to do my job as an individual contributor, but it doesn't flow up to the rest of the organization because my manager may not be there yet, or we're still used to looking at things in a different way. I also see kind of some leaders understanding what it can do, but it's a bandwidth question of like, I just don't have the time to build the thing I know I can that can be built to make things a lot more efficient. For example, I was talking to a finance leader, and they large company, and they have probably 3 or 4 people, and their main, each one of those people, call them analysts, have a responsibility to generate a report every month, right? That's an agentic problem to solve. But because of the size of the company and the data need, information security needs, like everything has to be kind of provisioned in the right way. So it becomes like that's the blocking mechanism versus the technology. So the technology exists to do it. There's a leadership support to do it, but it's just a bandwidth issue, and it's worked fine up until now. But let's say that does go through, that brings up a much bigger question. What do you do with those 3 or 4 analysts,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I
And
was thinking.
so you just get rid of them? No, because you probably need them for something else. And I think the thing that's going to be important in the workplace is not just hiring for skill, like technical skill. You almost need less technical skill and more like critical thinking and strategic thinking, the ability to kind of solve the problems that are going to come our way, right? So you're going to be hiring people with domain expertise and problem solving expertise more so than domain expertise and execution experience.
Because that is going to be delegated to AI powered tools potentially.
Right, right. Like you can give a CSV of whatever data you want, and within minutes run a Monte Carlo simulation and know very little about what that means, right? But get some directional results to be like, okay, we should probably focus more on this area, and let's go dive deeper into that and do that as a group or with more rigor.
So you would need a more like an overview idea of like you need, well, in order to run the Monte Carlo simulation, you need to at least know the term, know what kind
Right,
of results you're going to get and what to do with
right,
them.
right.
Because the AI
But like,
knows all of
but,
this.
but like, if you were to say, hey, we're in a like marketing analytics group, and no one here has any experience with that, the default was like, oh, let's go hire a consultant to do that for us.
Yeah.
And so, now if you have someone that's like a little more of a do-it-yourself, kind of can hack through, and like within half a day, you can understand everything that you need to do with the right prompt around that. Like, how do I interpret this? What does this mean? So now you kind of it's still a challenge though, because if you're kind of thinking about this with you out loud. So like, let's say you put in the system that pulls all the reports, the agent that pulls all the reports as with the frequency that you need. And you don't need that data like daily, right? Because some things you need books to close, you need sales to come in, all that stuff. So we said we need people who have some domain expertise and that strategic thinking kind of expertise. That doesn't come out of nowhere, right? Like you usually learn about that from doing those things. So there's this like, what happens to the bottom kind of the funnel, right? Or you bring employees in, they do the grunt manual work, but through that they learn about things. They sit in on meetings, they observe their managers and leaders and how they interact. They have those moments of on the job learning experience. Well, that's starting to go away because they're not doing those lower level things. How do you prepare, people to come into the workforce that way?
And do you feel like it kind of affects the overall mood within organizations? So if you see AI almost like making your position in the company feel more shaky,
Yeah.
does it kind of lead to dog eat dog kind of situations within companies? It's like whoever gets first to like being good with AI is going to win, and the rest is just going to get sacked.
Well, I think it's that AI is not going to replace your job, but if you will get replaced by someone who can use AI. I think that's a very valid, position to take on this topic. And it'll move. It's kind of like organizations are living things, and if you try to, put something into it that it's not ready yet, there's going to be this like, was it when you get someone gets an organ transplant? There's like a organ rejection, like the body rejects it, and so you have to do it in the right way. And going wholesale, let's just shift from how we're doing things, everything's AI, like that's not the right solution. So you have to find things that kind of slowly build in. And I think the things that slowly build in are some of the things that'll work in the background, like you mentioned, like customer service, customer service calls and interactions, or AI. Like if you're ever, you're online shopping, you're like, oh, maybe that's Bob, or maybe that's Bob the AI. That's talking to me about this. Yeah.
Um, if we go back to maybe AI topic currently is a bit stressful, I guess, for a lot of listeners.
Yeah.
If we go back to the topic of like you as a founder, what kind of like percentage would you put as to like having good days and bad days? Like bad days meaning when shit hits the fan, when something's stressful, when something's not working, to like good days where you feel like, yeah, we're on top of the world.
I would say at most you're 50-50.
That's a good result.
At most, right? And I would say it's probably more like 15 good, 85 not so good. But the 15 is so good that it outweighs. As a founder, as an entrepreneur, it always kind of the path to success is in a straight line, right? So it's just kind of, it oscillates and kind of goes up and down, but over time you're moving up. So it's 4 steps forward, maybe 2 steps back, and you kind of you continue in that way. And I think it's a good example of like, okay, if you're co-founding a company with a couple other people, are they prepared for that type of experience? Mm-hmm. And sometimes you will learn quickly that they're not, because they kind of retreat back and they become closed down, or they just go back to what they know, which may have been, this is how we did it at my last startup or my last company, which may not be the same stage or phase as we are now. Yeah. Right? Like people in times of uncertainty and stress go back to what they know. Right? And so if your co-founder is a sales and marketing co-founder, they'll think that the path out of this problem is more sales and marketing, when you really want to take a step back and say, okay, do we have the product is this the thing that people want before we go out and sell more of it, right?
How do you keep yourself, like even before, if you see your co-founder, going back, shutting off
Yeah.
because it's stressful. Before you can, let's say, heal him, give some energy, enthusiasm to
Yeah.
him to kind of get him back up. What kind of mental like frames of mind do you have? Maybe some tricks that worked for you to kind of keep yourself in a healthy frame when you're feeling down, which when shit hits the fan. How did you maintain the level of like confidence and energy motivation to continue
Yeah, I
moving?
think it's a great question. I think there's a point where you realize you might be at a point where that might be you. Like if it's that self-awareness. And then you say, okay, I'm going to not pause this conversation, but just kind of there's very few decisions that you can't sleep on overnight and see how you feel the next day. And then I think there's the muscle of just meeting and having conversations and having tough conversations. And the more you do that, the easier it is to have those tough conversations. If everything's okay, and you're feeling a little bit like this may not be going the right direction, but I'll just sweep it under the table, sweep it under the table, sweep it under the table, like a vent or under the rug, whatever analogy you want to use. That's when it just bubbles up, and then you get to like a blow up point. And I think that there's a lot of research out there. I mean, you and I have talked about a few of the books that we've both read around like what makes for a good founding team. And there's kind of like, oh, well, you should co-found a company, someone who you know really well and you have a relationship with. You might be related to, you may have been great friends, you might be neighbors, you may have gone to the same business school, you may have worked together in the last company. But what was interesting about that study was like the more overlapping circles founders have with each other before founding the company, the lower likelihood of success. And it goes back to decision making. And sometimes you have to make hard decisions, right? And say, okay, co-founder, you're a product person and you're going to run marketing for now, right? And because that's something you want to grow into, and you really wanted to be like the marketing person for the company, and we're going to give you a longer leash to do that with the limited funding that we have, and those extra 3 or 4 months could be a matter of like whether you succeed or not. So you make decisions to maintain the quality of the relationship over what's right for the company, right? And I
And
think,
in the long run, those add up.
and right in the long run, those add up, right? You put 2 or 3 decisions like that, and all of a sudden you spent more money than you need to. You end up not getting farther along far along as you were supposed to, right? And all of a sudden your runway's down. You have to raise another round on less favorable terms. Everyone's now like looking at like I went from X% to I'm getting further diluted. Now is it worth it for me? And that's a valid question too, to be like, okay, there's always like this notion of okay, you can own 100% of everything, but is it going to grow to be really big? Like I owned 100% of my consulting business, and when I sold it, I recognized the gain of that, but it was like I owned 100% of like a plum, or you have a slice of a watermelon, a big watermelon, or a big pumpkin, right? And the people who are investing in you are giving you the resources to make that thing grow to be massive. So like your smaller slice will be worth more, right? But I think those are important questions where people are like, okay, how big can this thing be, and is this really worth it for me? And especially if someone is not a serial founder type, but someone that has the appetite to take that risk once, and then says, well, I was working at a big company, and if I had stayed there, or if I stay there for 5 years, I'm guaranteed to make just as much, close enough, or maybe even more than if we have a massive exit, right? So it becomes like that. Like that's why those decisions you need to make. You make those hard decisions, and not, I'm not saying don't co-found a company with a friend or someone you have a relationship with, but just be aware of like your propensity to make decisions for the sake of maintaining relationships versus making decisions for the sake of the company. And that's kind of an important distinction.
When I was young, I think that's one of the things I remember the most that my father used to tell me. And in English, it would be if you have an option to either be friends or start a business together, be friends, and you'll
Right.
always find somebody to build a business with.
Right.
So, like, to not mix the friendship and the business.
Yeah.
And the older I grow, the more I realize how trying to maintain relationships hurts
Mhm.
the chance of
Yeah.
business making the right decisions to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not to say like you can't be friends with your co-founders. Like you should have personal relationships with them. But it's like it's a different nuance, right? And I'm sure of the founders that you've had on the podcast, and we'll have like some of their closest friends are probably the people they went through, but that's because of the experience that they went through, right? And they all had a common goal of like let's build a great business together.
So it's kind of friendship that's built on top of
On top
common
of right,
desire to do something great and
right,
something big.
right, right. I mean, and you think about the workplace, like a lot of people, especially early on in their careers, like some of their closest friends are the people they went through their early career together, right, and stayed in touch and
Yeah.
worked on things together. Yeah.
And has money been ever like the main motivation for you and a sufficient kind of driver to keep you up at night working on the business? Or was it something
I
else?
mean, there's always a commercial, like if something commercially viable, yes. Like, I mean, if not, then there's plenty of silly businesses I would have started for just for fun,
Non-profits, NGOs,
right?
let's
Not
go.
or like zero profit, like this is, profit neutral, lifestyle passion project type businesses. I think it's more than that. I think it's more of like making an impact, and seeing a hole in the space that you operate in that you can fill, and the money will kind of come. But you also have to understand what are the drivers to make that money come, right? And be um, in touch with what's happening in your space. And so uh, I would not discount the amount of domain expertise that's needed to go start a tech company to solve a problem. And oftentimes there are technology folks that have a technology and they go find a use case for it, right? And that takes sometimes they could be extremely lucky and find it. And sometimes they think they find it and they go build it and then it's not the right solution. The industry may not be ready. They might be missing a big part of the workflow or what have you. But I've seen it, firsthand. Some of the companies I was advising, they end up going to where they have the domain expertise. Like, they say, well, we could point this solution to all these different uh, potential problems, but you just have much greater comfort level. And then when you think about the sales traction, right? And the other traction areas too. So not just sales, but let's say sales. You go in front of a customer, like you're coming from that space. I've spent X amount of years in this space. I know this problem pretty well, and we brought on this technology to solve it, like built for us by us kind of model. And you see that a bunch of times. I was just at a conference and met with a few um, founders of kind of HR tech type solutions, but they were coming at it from the perspective of I was running companies and this is something I needed, and so I
Mm-hmm.
built it, for that use case. But it also, I think, lends itself to potentially higher likelihood of getting the right kind of funding too when you're going in front of investors and saying I've spent X amount of years in this space. You have founder market fit, right? Like enough about the space. You have an easier time building those relationships with your first set of customers, right? Because everything's founder led in the beginning, right? You're not going to hire a business development person, in the
Unless you have a
first.
lot of money.
Unless you have, even then, right? It's like
True.
you have to make sure you have the right person, and it's gonna, and you want to be as close to your customers in the beginning as possible, so you can kind of, so you get to that, elusive, the product market fit that we have the right thing. So I think that
And can we talk
Yeah.
about all the different fits that need to be there? Because what you've mentioned so far, there has to be a product market fit. That's something
Yes.
that everybody knows about. It's kind
Right.
of like the standard one. But then you said that among the founding team, there has to be a founder industry fit,
Yeah. So like founder market fit, right? So
founder
like
market fit.
does the founder know enough about the space to go then build something, right? And um, when we were building Uplevel, I was the founder that had enough knowledge of the org science space to go weave that into what we were building there. You oftentimes see two developers out of Amazon are building X to solve a childcare problem or some other problem, and they'll do a lot of early. I think the only way around kind of demonstrating that is doing a lot of early customer discovery work and just becoming super knowledgeable and listen, like being an amazing listener, right? And then being able to synthesize all those pieces of information to then say we know enough about this space, and that takes time. Um, I think you could supplement founder market fit with like a advisory board, right? Having people that are industry experts help guide you on the product roadmap, help open doors around
That's
that as well.
that's an interesting topic. Can we talk about that? Because I think that's something that a lot of founders underuse a lot. Because,
Yeah.
like for them, first thing, they don't know that they can get an advisory group.
Hmm.
Like second, once they know, it's like, oh, okay, now they've heard this podcast episode,
Yeah.
they'll be like, oh, an advisory group. That's interesting. Who can I reach out to? So,
Yeah.
what would be the kind of the good kind of people to look for? Like how high up the level, and what kind of message? What is the value exchange there that should be offered?
Yeah. So for the value exchange, because that's easy. There's a Founders Institute that has like a FAST agreement that basically outlines here are the responsibilities, the expectations, and it kind of creates like a two by like it's a grid, and there's where's the company. I don't have it in front of me. It's like maybe three levels of like just an idea, kind of a little bit beyond an idea, working prototype to like actually like in with customers to like and where's the advisor? Is it like a deep expert? Is it and then you kind of come up with and it's pre-populated with like how much equity they would get, right? And that equity, yeah, it's probably from a quarter point all the way to like I don't know 1.5 or 2%. It's on the lower side of things. And with that, there's like expectations. You're gonna, at the higher level of equity, you're gonna have, more frequent cadence of meetings. You will help with certain business development activities or help with one or two projects a quarter of some sort that are kind of outlined in that. So that's I think a great example of like you don't have to reinvent the wheel there, right? You could download it, look for it online, and you work off of that. I think where you have the discussion is okay. Are we on agreement on where the company is, and are we on the agreement of who I am as an advisor? And of course, the advisors always want to be in the higher level, but like it's like you want to be what's right because if you're over indexing on like I want the most amount of equity for my work, and you're not in a position to deliver that, then that relationship isn't going to last, right? And you're doing a disservice to the startup because now you've wasted 3 or 6 months of their time. The equity vests, but like it's whatever you get, you'd rather this is like you want to have whatever small percentage it is, you want the highest chance that percentage is going to be worth something.
Hmm.
Your first question was like, who do you bring on board? Is that
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what you need. So, like, I think there's like, hey, I have a really strong technical co-founder who maybe hasn't led teams at scale or hasn't led teams. When you want someone that could be like a CTO whisperer to them, right? Here's a way to think about growing the team and your roadmap. And then, on the domain expertise, I've served as like an organizational science advisor to a few different startups. And it's like there's some fluidity to that because the startups needs change over time, right? Like the startup might be focused on a solution for this problem, and then it moves on to to another problem, right? And then the CEO themselves, especially first-time CEOs, I think should surround themselves with someone. It could be in an official advisory capacity or not, to help them think through their first round of hires, um, their path to fundraising, all those things. It's like we celebrate fundraising in the media all the time. This company raised this, and that's just a check the box milestone. Like if you're building a venture scale company, you're gonna have to raise money, right? What you should be celebrating are outcomes of success. Like we built, we shipped, we have our first customer, now we got
Traction.
4 more, now we got traction, right? Like all of those, and we have retention. Those are the things that should be celebrated. And so I think having someone, and I think it's very easy to be like, oh, I raised 10 million on a 40 pre, like great. It's all paper. Like now you got to do something with it, right? And so I think that's where advisors can come in. Although like someone has spent a lot of time advising, like you can also build an AI board of advisors, right? You be really careful about that, but like you could do that, like that. And I mean, I've done it for myself, right, to kind of vet some ideas and things like that. You look at it with a grain of salt because everything that comes across seems pretty positive, right?
So hypothetically, you could just put two AI chatbots, take one, feed all of the information about David Youssefnia that you can find on the internet, everything that he's done, his
Hmm.
like
Yeah,
podcasts, the YouTube videos,
yeah,
like what he's talking about. Then you can put another one and put Shamil Molachev and put everything he's done. As, and then you have an advisory board. It's like, guys, I'm going through this.
right.
What can you suggest? Do you think that's something that like virtual advisory boards is something that founders are going to be using in the future a lot more of?
I think that some might be using it and they just don't know it. Like they're just
Mm.
asking domain specific questions of ChatGPT, but like you literally, I mean, look, we're both pretty smart guys, right? But like you aim way higher. Like you could have Steve Jobs as an advisor, Warren Buffett as an advisor, Elon Musk. You make out any of those folks, right? Because like, what is it? I don't know. How many books have you read over your life? Hundreds, if not 1,000, right? How
Yeah,
many can you remember right now? Like what the main points were? You don't have
15,
to, right? Maybe,
20.
right? Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't, right. So now, is it 200 million books that are in these large language models? It's roughly, we'll call a couple million, and they recall them immediately, right? So, like, there's ways of leveraging that. So, I think the role of the advisor will change a little bit too. I mean, I think some folks are more comfortable interacting with an AI in that way, but it's nice to have someone that's actually done it and not less likely to hallucinate a response or to miss a point. Um, and I think, but ultimately, advisors will also start to be, leaned on more for their relationships, right? And so, hey, I'm thinking about this space. Like, okay, great. Here's someone you go grab coffee with. Tell them I sent you, and kind of, or less of like a door opener. I mean, door opener for sales is. I've had conversations with startups around that, and it just feels a little bit more of a different relationship where your like responsibility is to close business. Like that's a business development role.
Mhm.
Kind of, it's the advisor. Kind of think of it as like having someone to help you reduce the likelihood of going over the guardrails that you want to set for yourself, right? Or moving too fast or doing something that could potentially break the company.
And what are you personally most excited about for the next 5 years? What are the next 5 years for David?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that there will be like a massive amount of innovation that's going to come through because the speed to kind of vet ideas and iterate is just so much faster now. But then, the trade-off is that like we, I guess this is like the trade-off is like everyone's moat is a little bit lower now. So people have to really concentrate on like what their wedge is and what that value is. So I think we're going to start to see some really interesting and exciting companies emerge. I'm a little, nervous about what that might mean for society, and kids that are in college now. Even the college experience is changing too, and that like, you know, college, university can't say don't use AI. Like it's just, it's a disservice to the students. But then if going to school is, you're there to learn, and part of the university is to evaluate how much you've learned. How do you evaluate learning? And so I think we might see like, it's got a little excited about it. I mean, it's kind of interesting to see like, you go back to like oral examinations. You come into class and you ask 4 questions, you have to explain to yourself, that. I also think that like we will become hopefully better communicators and collaborators, because those are the skills that the market will need. And we've kind of gone through a little bit of a downturn where everyone's glued to their phones. People don't communicate by talking; they communicate by texting. Like,
Been
and
there.
if we could go back to like ways of talking to people, I think we'll be excited about that too.
Well, I want to thank you so much for
Yeah,
taking the time and giving it to us and sharing so many good like pieces of advice. Because I think a lot of what you talk about is something that goes under the radar. It's kind of like people don't think about those things enough when starting the companies, and they kind of just stumble upon them as they go. And by those times, those are ticking bombs, which are quite dangerous um, for the success chances.
yeah.
So I think that it's a very like healthy conversation for founders
Well, like
to.
the road to like startup success is not smooth. It's not straight. It's not flat, right? It's uphill. It's downhill. It's bumpy. Sometimes you're going off road, right? And so it's like you surround yourself with all these different resources that become your GPS, that become your four-wheel drive, that become your bigger tires, right? And I think the piece that I would like your listeners to take away is that there's value in understanding who's on your team, and spending that time and to make sure you're better prepared for the journey.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, man.